When it comes to thread, the definition of a thread is nothing but thread is an independent task. Threads are used for multitasking in a programs. So for multiple things to execute at the same time. So that is where we'll be using the threading concept. And more it will be used like a gaming industry. It is mandatory. And some non-gaming industries and all, they don't means they use less instead of using instead of saying they don't use, they use less. Okay, so that is one. Then for defining a thread, we have discussed two different approaches. One is implementing runnable interface approach or extending the thread class, right? Then out of which the next question comes, which is the recommended approach? Out of the two approaches, which approach is recommended? Which is a recommended approach to define a thread? Is it extending thread class or implementing runnable interface? Which is recommended approach to define a thread? Anybody? Yeah, so it is like this. So where there is a runnable interface, and this interface is implemented by one class called a thread class. Thread class will implement this runnable interface. What is runnable? A predefined interface, and thread class also predefined class only. This thread class is inherited to programmer defined class called as my thread class. So from here only we are saying that extending the thread class approach. But what this thread class is having and all, we didn't discuss previously. So thread class will implement runnable interface. Yeah. Then this is the first approach. What is second approach? A programmer defined class called my thread class is implementing the runnable interface directly. This is the second approach. This part, runnable interface, and this part is a second approach. And this thread class and my thread class is the first approach. But internally, this is what it is happening. Yeah. Then where is that run method is present actually? Run method is present in runnable interface. Run method is present in runnable is one interface. So say here run method is present in this. Then which class is implementing that runnable interface? Thread class. Then when a class is implementing that interface, then the class has to give the body for that. Correct or not? Then this inside this thread class, the run method is there, public void run, but it has a no implementation, nothing. It is a just empty run method. That's why when we create a thread by using t dot start also, we discussed, if you remember, this is syntactically possible, but this will not create the, this will not execute the run method of our class, my thread class, because this is created on which object? T class object, thread class object, right? Correct or not? Before we pass this, if you remember the scenario, before we pass this, if we use t dot start, then that is executing the run method of a thread class which has no implementation. Then what we are doing from my thread class, programmer defined class, we are overriding that run method. So whenever we override and we create the object, the preference belongs to child class method only. And here also from interface, directly this class is implementing the interface, and here we are giving the body to that method directly. So this is the internally which is what is happening. Then by knowing this one or by understanding this, which approach is recommended is because, just let me write the quick syntax. What is the first approach? Public class my thread is a programmer defined class which extends thread class approach. This is the first approach, right? Then here we are going to write some run method and all those things. The what second approach? Public class, programmer defined class called same my thread only, which implements the interface name called as runnable. This is the second approach. Now, what is the now when it comes to the question, which approach is recommended is now if a programmer is following the first approach, and is it possible to use another class inside this my thread class? For example, so there is a one more class called A class, public class, class A. A class has some variables and some methods. Now this thread class wants to use the A class also at the same time. A class methods it wants to use. Then is it possible to use that? No, because if at all we are using this thread class and A class at the same time, that will become multiple inheritance at a class level. Is it possible? No, Java doesn't support multiple inheritance at a class level. It means with a first approach, we are missing the opportunity of using one more class at the same time. But when it comes to second approach, what is the thing we are using? We are using one interface. Then in interface concept we discussed, can a class extend and implement at the same time? Can a class extend another class and implements interface at the same time? Yes, it is possible. But first one has to be extends, then second one has to be implements. It means at this point of time, we can write extends keyword and which class features you want it, that class name we have to use. Public class my thread extends a space implements runnable. Means at the same time we are defining a thread and at the same time we are using the another class features also into this my thread class. That is a possibility. So therefore, what is the conclusion? Which is recommended approach? The recommended approach is implementing runnable interface approach is recommended. So which is recommended? The answer is implements runnable interface is the recommended approach. What is the reason? Because if we go for this implements runnable interface approach, the class can access other class features also by using extends keyword. But if you are going for first approach of extend thread class, then this class cannot use the another class features. It is not possible. That's why second approach is recommended. Clear? Guys, am I clear? Yeah. So let us go for the next part of it. What is the next part? Which method we are using inside the programmer defined class? Run method we are using. And which method we are calling from main method for execution? Start method we are calling. We are using a run method or we are defining a run method, but we are calling a start method. Why? That's the next question. Why start method is the next question. So for that, so there is let us take one real time scenario. It is something like assume there is a LKG child is there, a child who is going to LKG to school. Yeah. Then for this LKG child to go to school, who has to wake up early? Is it the kid or is the mother? Mother has to wake up early. Correct? And who has to prepare the food for him? The mother has to do some cooking job. Then who has to wake up this kid? Who will wake up the child? The child will himself wake up, or mother will wake up. The waking up of the child also can be done by mother only. Who has to give the bath? Mother has to give the bath to the child, brushing this, that, and all, clothing and everything. Then finally, who has to feed the food? Child will eat, or mother has to feed? Mother has to feed the food. Correct? Who has to prepare the lunch box? Mother has to prepare the lunch box. Who has to pack the bag? School bag? Mother has to pack the school bag. Yeah. Who has to drop at the school? Mother has to drop at the school. And carefully, the mother will hand over to the caretaker in the school. Then the kid will go and sleep in the class. Correct or not? Who is going to the school actually? Child is going to the school. But who is doing all this job? Mother. Any guarantee that child will listen in something in the class? Still no guarantee. So in the same way, when it comes to run method also, run method is like a child. So which has so many other things to do by something like mother. Here start method is there. Run method is our child and mother is our start method. Then what the start method will do? Start method. So I'm talking about start method. Start method will allocate thread scheduler. Will allocate thread with thread scheduler. What is this thread scheduler? So when multiple threads are coming at the same time for execution, so JVM has one more internal component called as thread scheduler. Thread scheduler will schedule the threads depends on the priority. Yeah. If somebody's thread priority is higher, then that is one preference will be given. If the thread's priority is lower, then thread preference will be given. So our thread has to schedule with the thread scheduler. Who will do that? It is start method which will do that. Start method will allocate the programmer defined thread with a thread scheduler. So then the start method will make a run method to be ready. Okay, I have given the thread scheduler. So you may get a chance anytime. You be ready for the execution. Okay. Then start method will push a run method into running state. Yeah. So these are the just outlook of jobs. What start method will do? Start method will allocate thread scheduler, thread with thread scheduler. Start method will make the run method to be ready, and start method will push the run method into running state. Then run method will be executed by thread. So this is what the process. It is like who is to do all this job. Run method has no capacity to do it directly. So it is a start method which has the capacity or which is allocated with the different jobs like this. That is why we have to use the start method so that which internally executes the run method whenever during the thread running process. So that's why we start method. Understood? Why start method means we can just remember these things and convey in a meaningful way. Don't say running state first. First thread scheduler, then ready state, then running state. Done. That's why you have to use the start method. Any questions online? Why start method means start method has a specific responsibilities when it comes to run method. So that is why start method only we have to call. If we call run method, what will happen? It is a thread bypass. Thread creation will be bypassed, means will not be created. Next part, what is thread life cycle? Thread life cycle. It means we are defining a thread. When we define a thread, how long the thread will be present, how, how much duration. So that is what the next part is, thread life cycle. What thread life cycle? So whenever we are creating the object, if I take our example only, then my thread some empty equals new my thread. So this is the syntax that we are writing inside a main method. So whenever we write this one, then the thread will born. This is a born status. A new thread will born. Yeah. So then what we are doing there? So from this state to push into the next state, what we are doing? That empty dot start method we are using. So what this start method will do? Start with method will make the thread ready state. Thread will be in a ready born and then ready state. So from this ready state, when thread scheduler will allocate processor time. It means when this thread has to execute, that will be done by the thread scheduler. When thread scheduler allocates the processor time for the thread, then the thread will move to run state, running state. Yeah. Once this run state is over, that means once the eh, execution of the entire run method is over. That's what the running state, right? Once this run method is over, then thread will die. That's it. These are the 4 stages. Thread will born whenever we create the object for that thread. Whenever we are defining a thread in one programmer defined class, whenever we create the object for that thread class, then thread will be a born state. And whenever we are calling this start method, so we discussed just now why we have to call method. Start method will schedule the thread with a thread scheduler, and start method will push the thread into ready state. And during this process, when thread scheduler will allocate the processor time for the thread, then thread will move to running state. And once the job of the thread is over, or execution of running method is run method is completely over, then thread will move to the dead state. That's all. Yeah, this is the life cycle. And I want you to explore some of these methods on threads. The methods on threads called a method called join method, a method called sleep, wait. Yeah, these are different methods. Please explore. Yeah. So whenever any of these methods are used, from running status, then the thread will come back to ready state once again. It will never go to born state. It will never go to dead state. So whenever you are using any of these methods, so then from running state, thread will come back to ready state once again, and again it will run. And again, if any of these methods are used, it will come back to this ready state. So these two places where it may be pushed back to ready state once again to run, to ready state to once again run. So this is what it will happen. So whenever you are using this join or sleep or wait, I'm just giving a overall idea. Okay. So it, because once it is dead, how can it be it's pushed to ready state directly? It has to born again, right? That's why from running status to ready status only, there are some transactions can happen. Yeah. So from running state to ready state, again go back to running state. Again running state, ready state, again go back to running state. So once that entire process is over, it will come to dead state. That is about the uh, thread life cycle. Yeah. Next. Next point to know is what is a thread life cycle? Yeah, thread life cycle is over. What is the thread priority? Thread priority. Thread priority. We discussed this concept during string builder, string buffer. So that is, yeah. So when multiple threads are accessing at the same time one object, then there is a JVM will prioritize the execution of those threads in some order. So in what order? This depends on what is the priority of the thread. So for that, the maximum value for the thread priority is 10 and the minimum value for this thread priority is 1, 1 to 10. Then in MSET, for example, say in MSET ranking, first rank is a best rank or 10th rank is a best rank? First rank is the best rank, right? Yeah. So when it comes to thread priority, first one is the 1 is lowest priority and 10 is the highest priority. We can't give any priority value other than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 10. If we are giving, then we are going to get the exception at runtime. Yeah. Then the next point is default priority. Default priority for any child thread. For any child thread is same as its parent thread. What's the meaning of this? For in our previous discussion of the programs, which thread is creating a child thread here? First program will be started by which thread? Main thread is starting the program execution. And when this start method got executed, main thread is creating the child thread. Correct or not? Therefore, what's the priority of child thread? Same as main thread. That's what I mean to say. Whenever one thread creates another thread, the created thread will become parent thread and that new thread will become a child thread. Therefore, what's the priority? Default priority for any child thread is same as its parent. So in our example, so there are two threads. One is a main thread. So this is a main thread. And somewhere in this process, the main thread is running and one more thread is getting generated when start method is executed, right? So this is child thread. Now, what's the priority of this child thread? Is same as the main thread. That's what I mean to say about this point. Then what's the priority of main thread? Child thread priority is same as main thread, but what's the priority of main thread then? Yeah, so here the default priority of main thread is 5. So when main thread priority is 5, then what's the priority of child thread also? Child thread also 5 only. Thread 0 we called as thread 0, its priority is 5. Priority will be 5. Main thread priority also 5 by default. Are we giving? No. It is the program is set in that way. The default priority of main thread is 5. Clear? So this is about the thread priority. So then let us see the next small part, that is getting the thread name. To get a thread name, we can, I think we discussed or I said maybe the point that programmer can give the name to the threads. So what is the default name? Main is one thread name and thread 0 is a default name of first child thread, and thread 1 is a default name of second child thread. Like this, we can generate any number of threads at the same time. So that is the default names. How do we get the name? Is it really main or just because I'm saying? One proof is in exception window. We can see from the console that exception from thread main. Correct? That is one proof that there is a thread called main. Then as a programmer, we can use a thread class, thread dot current thread is one method. Then on this again, dot get name is one method. This line of code, if you are using, then programmer can see what is the name of the current thread. And then by using the thread class, dot getting the current thread, dot programmer can set the name. So here by default, let us assume this is a main. Here is a main. I don't want that to be a main. Then I want to use as say James Gosling. I am changing the thread name. Thread name, default name is main for first thread or starting thread. Then default name for the first child thread will be thread 0. Then programmer can get the name and programmer can set the name also by using the appropriate suitable methods. So if we change this one, then will come to know what is the thread name. Is it main or is it changed to our own choice? We can give in real time for a meaningful scenarios, they'll be using these things. Okay. So that is about the thread name, which we can get it being a programmer. So we will see these similar points about how do we know the priority is 5 or not. That is one thing. And how do we get the names of the threads or not is the second point. The remaining things is only understanding. We can't prove it. Okay. So for that, if I go back to Eclipse and in our, okay, thread only we are there. One of this previous program I'm using. So my thread implements runnable interface approach. No problem. Yeah, extend thread class. Okay, I'll choose one of these and also I'll go for main method. Yes, this is what we discussed in the last class. Correct? Now what's the point? The next thing is I want to know the priority of this thread. Right? So first let me go for thread name. Then we'll go for priority also. So now if I write something at line number 11, which thread is executing that? Line number 8, 9, whatever it is, whatever the code that is present in this main method, this will be executed by which thread? Main thread, correct? And what are the code that is present inside this run method? This will be executed by child thread, correct or not? Yeah. So first let us get the names. Let us get the name and let us also get the priority. So first here I'm writing how to get the name. Thread class dot, what's the method? Current thread dot get name is a method. And this entire line of code we can write inside a print statement. I'm cutting this from here, then I use a print syntax, then I'll paste it inside this one. So it is getting the name and I'm printing that name. And next one, again to print the priority. To print the priority, what I would like to use is I'll use a print statement and then what's the class? Thread class, then get the current thread. Thread dot current thread, then dot get priority. Get priority also I'm getting. Okay. So this is the, what's the priority by default? 5 is the priority, correct? Then the same two lines I'll copy and I'll go back to my thread class. Who is running this run method? I wanted to know. That's why I'll paste it here. Are you understanding me? I'm getting the name of the threads and also I'm getting the priority of the threads also. Yes. So here inside main method I have written get name and I have written get priority. And inside this child thread also inside run method, that means child thread is executing this one. So there also I'm getting the name of the thread and getting the priority of the thread who is executing this code. Yeah. So now let us save it back to this main method and run this code. You can see what's output we got? Thread 0. Thread 0 is executing the child thread. What's the priority? 5. And what's one more thread? Main thread. Yeah. Main thread. What's the priority of this main thread? 5. Main is one thread whose priority is 5 and which is executing this for loop. Printing main thread, main thread, main thread. Then followed by, there is a one more thread called as thread 0. What's the priority? 5 and which is printing just child thread. Thread 0 only I'm printing. Okay, no confusion of thread 0 is a name or not. So here I'll print, I'm changing this print message as child thread. What is the name of the child thread? That is nothing but thread 0. A thread called as thread 0 whose priority is same as the main thread only and it is printing. That is executing this child thread. Main thread, child thread, main thread, child thread. Understood the name and priority part? Yeah. Now let us just change the thread name. Which thread is executing this run method? Which thread is executing this run method? Now two threads are there, right? What is the first thread name or actual thread name? Correct. Child 0, no, thread 0. Which thread is executing this main method? Main thread is executing. And which thread is executing this run method? Thread 0. Child thread called thread 0 is executing the name. That's what we have seen in the output also. Thread name called main and thread name called as thread 0. Correct? Now I don't want this main and thread 0. I want to change to my own names. Then I want to change one as James and one more thing as Gosling. Let us see how do we change it. Yeah, set. So currently it was a name, but later on I want to change this name. How to change it? So before getting it, I'm setting it first. Setting it. So by using thread class dot get the name first. Current thread or what's the thread? Dot set name. Set name. You can see one thread name in string format. I am giving the name called Gosling. Where I'm writing this in run method, I'm changing the name to Gosling. Then I'm getting it. Is it really Gosling or it's still it is thread 0 or not? Then the same line of code. Okay. So from main method, before we get it, again I'm using a thread class dot current thread dot set name. Set name. And here I'm setting the name as James. Now let me save and run the program once again. So what is the first thread name? James. And what's the priority? Same as default main only. We did not change. And second thread name, Gosling, and the priority is 5. Yeah, so that's how a programmer can change the name of the threads in a meaningful way, depends on your requirements or projects. We can do that. Yeah. So this is about the threads concept. Like I said, I recommend you to explore on this join method, sleep method, wait method to a little bit more, or when to be used that, when we should use that and all. Just a one line statement for the interview purpose. And the company, if you are applying for as gaming industry, then definitely we should know much more about the threads concept.